Hi, I'm Rick Harsch, and I think I'm going to do a master's class right now. Um, Impeding me is the fact that my phone is low on batteries, and so it's plugged in, and I have to sit here at the edge of my bed and start it at least. And it doesn't seem to give any indication when I'm filming how much battery is left. So at some point when I decide to move, we're going to be taking a big risk. Well, what I want to start with, there's a reason I'm doing this, and I'll get to that. Something popped up there. Somebody commented on something, and it pops up. I have no choice. Anyway, we all know the problems with phones and dealing with phones and, all that stuff. And I'm already straying from my original idea. But I want to say one thing. If I lean like this, maybe I'll be more steady. And that's it. Everybody loves to hear stories about assholes. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, if you're thinking, I need to write something that people want to read, write about an asshole. People love to read about assholes. We all hate assholes, but they're very, very entertaining. And I'm going to tell you a story about an asshole. And it's because it's a writer's story. There's this guy I met at the writer's workshop. I didn't really meet him well. I didn't get to know him at all, but I was in a class with him. And when I first heard of him, the rumor was that he was in the workshop only because his father was a big shot at that university, the University of Iowa. And I thought, that's a pretty nasty rumor, I don't like rumors like that, if his father was, William Faulkner and, taught at the university, and he was a really talented guy, got some of his father's talent, they'd say the same thing. So, I just thought that's an ugly rumor. Then I had a class and he was in it. And turns out the guy had absolutely no talent. So little talent that when he put a story up in that class, I thought, man, he's going to get nailed. And a good friend of mine was laughing and saying it was a surreal story because the descriptions were so inept that, sometimes somebody'd be drinking a cup of coffee, but the elbow would be, like up here somewhere. And so, anyway, so my friend was saying, this is surreal. And so I knew he was going to get nailed, and I thought, let's not, he's too easy a target. So I started the class by talking about what was good in the novel. That was very hard to do. I had to invent things. I said that it was a classic American tale. I may have mentioned this before, but I didn't do it in context of the whole thing about what an asshole this guy was. He remembered me, and we got in touch on Facebook after a number of years. And he'd followed some of my political postings and so on. And turns out he's a sort of a liberal, and I'm left of Harpo Marx. Anyway, so we had a couple of. There was a dog in here a second ago. Anyway, we had a couple of little discussions and so on, and he was able to sneak in the fact that he'd had some publishing success, which surprised the hell out of me. But I thought, okay, I'll order your book of short stories, and he would mail stuff about his family and so on. He was married to a lovely Mexican woman who had a very unfortunate brain aneurysm that I had no idea. I have no idea what it did to her, other than it gave her one droopy eye. Well, that is pertinent to the story, perhaps, because about a year and a half ago, a little more than that, I asked him, "Would you read The Driftless Zone and maybe write a blurb on it?" And he said, "No, to me, that's already breaking the rules of writers, independent writers, let's call them. I'll tell you why in a second. And he said, no, because I've just left my wife after 3 years of hell, having to take care of her all the time, and I want to devote time to myself and my own writing. And the next thing I know, I'm getting, on Facebook, picture after picture of Istanbul. So apparently he went off to Istanbul. He had the money to do that, and he wrote. Well, we don't know if he wrote, but he went to Istanbul, and a good way to celebrate leaving your unfortunate spouse. And but I would say I don't have the evidence to call him an asshole yet. And about 6 months later, Riverboat Books did a GoFundMe campaign, and I just passed it along to everybody I could, and I got a letter back from him on Facebook, a note on Facebook that said, "I'm sorry, I don't. I have a personal policy against asking for money for writing." And I said, what? You mean you won't even share it? Right, you won't even share it. Okay, now I know he's an asshole. And we had a brief exchange about that, and he's very defensive, of course, and it ended up with me. I wish I could find the message I sent him, the final message, because I used a bit of humor in telling him what a dick he was, and so this guy's a real asshole. It's funny. I did order his book, and it was very, very bad. So bad that when a mutual acquaintance asked me about his book, I had to be honest. I mean, publicly, I said nothing about his book, of course, but privately, I read some passages that just cracked my friend up, and he's a very polite man, and doesn't revel in another person's ineptitude, but he got a kick out of that. And the funny thing was that this guy, somebody once sent me since then somebody sent me an author bio of him, one of those kinds that makes you seem really exotic, and talked about how he was in Japan, and that's why he wrote about Hiroshima. Um, where else? Well, never mind about that. It's already. I'm going to go to Cambodia and write about the horrors of the Khmer Rouge, but I got to get the money up first. And anyway, so then the guy, same guy, yeah, in the thing, he went to Jamaica and lived in a shack, and pounded out some novel or other on a used typewriter. And it made it sound like really, really, really cool guy, dramatic. He's from a wealthy family, and he went to Yale, and he certainly received public funds now and then. So this idea about not wanting to ask for money for writers, or ask, that is just asshole. But the thing is, his book had like 14 blurbs on it. And every blurb, I've mentioned this in another YouTube class, every blurb was like very short, and you could just see they're all just getting it done. They're doing the right thing. They're not saying, no, I won't blurb this piece of shit. They're doing it, which is what I would have done if he'd have sent it to me. I'd have just made up something that sounded good and said, yeah, here you go. What do I care? But the thing is, he was not an independent writer. He was a dependent writer. Now, why am I talking about that? Is because it's not very often that a writer like myself has a request to say anything or do anything, but somebody who watches this channel asked me, could you do a class on being an independent writer? I'm going to have to make some assumptions here on what it means to be an independent writer, what the person means about being an independent writer. But the first thing is, don't be an asshole. Be generous towards writers, because that's your community. That's your other than your other communities in life, because you're also a human being and you live somewhere and most people aren't writers. Your other community is the writing community. Be generous and be good to your fellow writers. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, let's take a chance here on moving. Lesson number two, don't ever worry about what anybody is going to say in the writing world. Don't worry about your position, your standing in the writing world. I'm right now standing in my writing world because I'm looking for a book. I want to read an example of something I wrote that, an independent writer would write, and it's because my editor at the time thought I should not have let you do that. And basically what it was the, the Iowa Writers Workshop has the Michener Copernicus Award, or they used to. I don't know if they still do. But the only people eligible for that award, and it was $12,000, which to a guy like me was, fucking hell, I can write for 2 years on that. So being an independent writer, keep the expenses down, okay? And whatever job you work, make sure it's just either something that helps with your writing or at least doesn't get in the way of it. Probably most of the time we just have to not let it get in the way of it. But you don't worry about having a lot of money, because you're probably never going to. And don't live and work as if you might someday have a lot of money if you're a good boy. Don't be a good boy is another thing I would say. I found the book I'm looking for, but it's not easy to get at. I got it here. Okay, it's called Billy Verite. It's part of my Driftless trilogy, which will be coming out in Corona Samizdat. And that's another thing about being an independent writer, is don't worry about who your publisher is. Self-publish? Well, one way to get around that is to do what we're doing with Corona Samizdat, which is kind of like the fiction collective thing. Publish cheap books as a group, and I attached myself to a publisher in Slovenia, and that was already well set up. I didn't intend to do it, but it was a way to get out from under the problem I had with Riverboat Books. Anyway, here you have what I did with Billy Verite. I won the Michener Award, and I'm probably the first person ever from the Iowa Writers Workshop who had to publish 2 novels before he got the Michener, or she. In my case, I am a he. But what they do is they give out these Michener Copernicus Awards, 7 to 10 every year. So it's the most, if you go to the Iowa Writers Workshop, this is the award that you're most likely to get. And you don't have to have a novel, but if you do have a novel, they're going to give you one, because if you become famous, then everybody gets to hear about it, And so here we have acknowledgments, which when you get the award, they say you have to write in your acknowledgments that you got the award, okay? So here's what I wrote. I received what's called a Michener Copernicus Award for this novel. 12 grand in small unmarked bills delivered in 12 monthly payments to prevent me from investing unwisely. And I'm thankful to the Michener Foundation and the University of Iowa, especially now as I write, because I have another 6 months of this literary swag coming. However, as is generally the case with awards, this came long after the book was finished, and so I did nothing to lift me from the circumstance of wretched dependence I was in while writing it. It seems more important, therefore, to thank, with the help of an exhaustive list, those who provided me aid when I needed it. Now, I'm nearing 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop and we'll do part 2.